Okay. I feel like we're in business, right? Let's hope. I think. Better than last time. Okay. My friends, thanks for joining me. Let me just make sure we're in good shape here. I think so. I have the tech god saying hello, so I guess the stream is lining up. That's good. Hi, tech god. Okay. Thanks for joining, everyone. Let me see. I know I'm looking over here. I should be looking over here, right? Okay. Ready to go. Got my Bobo broke my finger a couple weeks ago, so it's just been healing. So my typing and my scrolling's been a little wonky. So, but anyway, thanks for joining. Look at you watching us talk about VMware Fusion and our fancy new tech preview. I am thrilled with what the team's been able to put together here. I mean, it's been a long time coming, right? We've been transitioning to the new Apple Silicon platform for a couple of years, and it's just not as trivial as we'd all hoped, where, you know, we can just take an app, bring it over, and expect everything to work, or take an operating system and bring it over and expect it to work. So we spent a lot of time trying to get it right. And we're a bit different than, you know, some other players in this space because we have vSphere and our enterprise suite of everything, right? And so keeping parity between our platforms is like critically important. So for us, it's been a challenge of like trying to figure out how to bring all of these new functionalities and all this new technology to being while maintaining this level of sort of interoperability with our enterprise stack, right? And on Apple Silicon, we have ESXi ARM, right? As far as the code path that we're borrowing, right? So like vSphere and Fusion and Workstation also sort of share most of the same code, much of the same hypervisor code. And so on Apple Silicon, it's an ARM-based platform. It's Apple's custom chips, of course, but it respects the Arch64 architecture, which is great from our perspective because we were able to take VMware Fusion and certify it as a system-ready profile, right? Which basically means that we present a specific hardware profile that operating systems can then write against, and everything's going to work nice and pretty together. So a lot of work, just all this under the hood plumbing stuff that we've been doing over the years. And so we've been doing all this like back end stuff that's mostly invisible just to keep things, to get things to work. But finally, we were able to get the very critical things that we needed inside of Windows 11 ARM with respect to VMware Tools. And so that means the new version of VMware Tools gives us all kinds of goodness like drag and drop, copy paste, auto fit guest resolution, and of course, my favorite, 3D acceleration using Metal. Now, what's cool about 3D acceleration isn't just that, you know, yeah, we can run apps. I mean, ultimately, that's the end goal here, right? But it can support emulated workloads as well as native Arch64 ARM workloads, which means if you have a game that's a 32-bit Windows game or app, and you bring that under Windows 11 ARM, Windows 11 ARM has the emulation layer built into it. So if there's 3D graphics happening, we can intercept that and then render it using our graphics driver, our graphics engine, and that gets rendered using Metal on the host, which is using Apple's exceptionally fancy GPU. So we have 32-bit emulated workloads. We now have 64-bit emulated workloads as well. So 32-bit apps, 64-bit apps, Intel apps, and then of course native ARM 64-based or Arch64 apps that are 3D enabled inside of Windows. So all that being said, we are just absolutely thrilled and just I'm so glad that you're with me here today. We're gonna go through some of the, I'm gonna do some demo. We're gonna show off a little bit of what's new. The chat I've got open over here, so please feel free to throw questions at me, anything you want. I have it set for low latency, so I should be able to see things in fairly real time-ish. There might be a little bit of a delay there, but, and of course, it'd be super cool if share the stream, bring your friends. This thing is also going to be recorded, so it'll be available after the fact. So all that being said, let me play around with that. And so just a caveat too, I am crazy. I am using Sonoma Beta 3 on, where's my mouse? On my Mac Studio, which is a beefy Mac Studio, M1 Ultra with 128 gigs of RAM. And I'm using the most recent version of OBS. And so OBS has crashed on me a couple times. And this version of Mac OS I'm finding is kind of weird with dual displays. And in my case, I have like a vertical monitor over here, and it gets weird sometimes, and I have to like force quit dock. So I am totally crazy in that this stream might just like poof at any point in time. But we like to live on the edge, and I like to fly without a wire. So here we are. So let me change my thing, and let's do some demoing. Okay, cool. So here we got I can see my talking head, and we've got our, Fusion here. So for show, we've got, of course, Fusion tech preview version, last ending in 8932. And again, I'm running Mac OS Sonoma on my Mac Studio with an M1 Ultra chip in it. So it's pretty good for as far as graphics goes. I don't know if you knew this too, but again, Sonoma, this is like one of my favorite features. It's so silly, but like I love it. Where if you click the desktop, it invokes like the expose feature. So I would have that mapped to something or other, but just being able to like click the desktop and get to stuff on it, very nice little touch. Very, very nice little touch. So I think first things first is let's go through a Windows installation. I've got a bunch of ISOs here. I've got some that are pre-installed and they've got games loaded up, and we can load them up and see if they crash, and we play that game. Will it crash? We've been watching a lot of Is It Cake lately, and that's in my brain. So anyway, but let's go ahead and get a Windows ISO and get that created. So right now, it is a bit of a challenge sometimes to get a Windows ISO. There are some great tools that the community has put together. Shout out to TechnoGeezer, Paul, and your Epic ESD to ISO script. Works well. I'm a big fan of that. So let's assume that you've got an ISO file, right? And so I've got a handful of them here. In this case, for Windows, I'm going to be using the 22621 edition. And we'll just continue. And this is, of course, for our TPM. So we're going to create a password here. And that password is going to get saved into the keychain, so I don't have to think about it later on. Now, this is important. If you want to move this VM to another device, you're going to need that password. And so you're going to need to be able to get that out of keychain, generate your own, and remember it, or what have you. But in either case, if you want to move this to another device, it's going to have to be, you're going to need the decryption password. And so, good to go. I like to customize my settings, so we'll just call this Windows 11 5.23. What is this VMware Tanzu desktop thing? Okay, so we're up, and right off the bat, I'm just going to show by default 3D accelerated graphics are enabled, so super sweet. I definitely recommend 8 gigs of RAM on here. Putting it lower isn't really going to do much. Basically, the way that the thing works is on systems that have less than, or on VMs that have less than 16 gigs of RAM configured, it will use half of the available memory for graphics. So if you have a VM that's configured with 8 gigs, it'll use 4 gigs of RAM. And so in this case, this VM, I've not configured it yet, but we'll go ahead and actually, I got lots of processing power and more RAM to spare than I can shake a stick at. So let's just go ahead and go crazy here. And we're going to do 8 processor cores and 32 gigs of RAM, which is going to be 32,768 megabytes. Fun. Okay, cool. And so this is a machine with like 20 cores, so I'm not, starving my host at all, even if the UI is like, oh no, you have more processors than you think you can use, which is ridiculous because I have, a whole crap load of cores on this machine. So let's see, we got the camera, USB, Bluetooth. USB, of course, is going to be 3.1. 3.2 is going to be coming around pretty soon. It's not that, big a deal. Our sound card, our CD drive with our ISO. I like to give the disk a little bit more space, so let's just go 256 per kicks. And we can see too, we have our trusted platform module. So good stuff. And finally, we are using hardware version 21. Hardware version 21 is important because it is required for what we call the high bandwidth data transfer path. And so the high bandwidth path is what we use to go from host to guest, or rather there is an interoperability path. There's technically 2 paths. Previously with Fusion 13, we had the slow path. And the slow path is maybe 10 megs a second. And you'll notice that really on Linux machines with shared folders, where the throughput, the folders show up, the files show up, but like getting folders in and out is a little tricky. So now on Linux machines and everywhere else with the high throughput data transfer path is open and is in full speed. So basically performance improvements for all the existing Linux VMs, and it opens up the world for drag and drop and copy paste inside of Windows VMs. And what's cool is you don't really have to do anything inside the VM to make that change. You just have to change the hardware version to 21 and you're golden. So I think we're good there. Let's fire it up. One of these days we'll catch that and click it for you. So while that's going, I'll minimize this fella. And we're going to click through the installer kind of normal like. It should go fairly quickly, a couple minutes, but at the same time, there'll be, when there's stuff happening, we can take a look at other stuff so we're not just sitting there watching a progress indicator go through. As fun as that is. We'll say enterprise, and I accept these terms. We're going to do a custom install. That's what we want, our 256 gig drive, and away it goes. So it's surprising to me that they haven't changed this since like Vista, I think, was when this UI got put together. But in any case, we're off to the races. So while that's going, let's bring up the library again and see. I've got, I had some Linux virtual machines that I wanted to show off too, but it looks like maybe I must have lost one. So, I have happened to be in the middle of writing this little app because that's the kind of guy I am. And this little app is actually going to help me download some ISO files. So let's go ahead and I just want to take Fedora 38. Go. Save it. Sure. Okay. And so that's going to download. And while I'm here, while that stuff's happening, let's see if we have any questions from the gallery. Okay. Will we get Mac OS VMs too? That is another little project that I'm working on. We're not quite there yet. The main challenge with Mac OS VMs is the way that we did them on Intel is that we would take the install.app, we would convert that to an ISO file, and then we would take that ISO file and boot off of it. The problem with that is that when in the Apple Silicon world, those ISO files don't really exist anymore, and that .app isn't built the same way. The .app is more like a .ipsw, where it's like an iPhone. And so it's locked, and so we can't extract from it and then boot off of it. Meanwhile, Apple has introduced a whole bunch of new APIs that will allow us to high-level APIs that allow us to boot macOS virtual machines. And I've actually written a proof of concept that does it. It's not a ton of code, a few thousand lines. It's very well documented. There's not a lot of craziness going on there. The challenge is that I mentioned earlier, we have compatibility and parity with our enterprise offerings, ESX, our hypervisor, right? We've already built all the stack to do VMs, right? And so having another API at the very low level, even if it is a technically higher level API, is challenging for us because we have to, there's no compatibility story there. We can't use any of our existing built systems. We have to reinvent the wheel as far as how this all works. And so it's a challenge. That's not to say that we're not doing it. It's a work in progress, but just to set the expectation that, we have all of this extra stuff, an extra consideration that we have to make. So anyway, while Windows is installing, I'm actually just we'll let that sit for now, and let's go through the Windows installer. So right here, in the tech preview documentation, I had written that, you want to do shift function F10, and then do the out-of-box experience. Where is it? Function shift F10, and that. What is going on? Stop. Well, that's funny, isn't it? What just happened? I think I just opened like a million of those windows. That was weird. Something in the mouse got stuck. In any case, in the guide, I said basically to run this command, OBE /bypass NRO. And what that actually does is there's a spot in the installation where when you get to it, it says, hey, like, let me connect to the internet and register your operating system with your Microsoft account. Which, okay, cool, but we can't exactly connect to the internet right now because we don't have drivers installed. On Intel systems, this isn't a problem because Microsoft actually ships our drivers with Windows. We're not quite there on ARM yet. And so in order to get around this, historically what we could have done is like the tools installer was done using a PowerShell script. But what we're going to do is actually we're just going to run the setup exe right from here and hope it works. And to be honest, I haven't done this yet. So Paul, I hope this works, buddy. Okay, so we've connected the tools ISO. So we go, file, install. You can see that it says cancel, which means that it's there. And if I go cd d D, where is it? Is it in D? I would have expected it to have been in D, right? Well, mounted, connected. Oh, was it Z? X? Someone help me out here. Yeah, but it isn't. It should be just D. But, oh my dude. Why did CDD not work? That's weird. Anyway, thanks, buddy. Derp. So we should now just be able to do dir, and we see setup.exe, so we should be able to just run setup.exe, right? There we go. We're doing this first time. I have no idea if this is going to work. This might totally blow up in my face. This is why we do it live. Cool. So we'll do a complete, go to town, right on. Actually, while that's going, I'm going to actually take my Fedora that I wanted to install, and I'm actually going to start it here. This little tool that I built, I can like open it in Finder, which is like, cool. However, I can actually just go open it directly in Fusion. Look at that. 38. Live stream. I'll let that go. I'll give it, let's say 4 and 8. And we'll give it a bit of a bigger disk. 3D will turn on by default, max it out, keep the resolution small, and go to town. You can see Windows back there getting black, so that means that the screen resolution is figuring itself out. Let's see what happens when we click OK. I assume that the install is going to restart, and it's going to look nice and pretty now. There we go. Ooh, very nice. Yeah, pretty that looks. Super high quality, full resolution, 4K-ish Retina display. We're automatically adjusting the user or the interface size, the DPI. Let's just see if this works. Ooh, look at that. Right off the bat. That's cool. All right. The thing is still checking the disk for integrity. We're not going to add a second layout. Now look, Fedora's coming up here. Let's just go ahead and get the install started here so we can get to seeing it in action. And so look at this though. I mean, I'm running 2 virtual machines, same time. Both of them are very heavily configured. I mean, 4 CPUs on one, 8 on the other, 32 gigs of RAM on one, 8 on the other. And I'm live streaming right now using OBS on bleeding edge Mac OS stuff. I am crazy. But you know what? We're keeping on here. Okay, go to town. Cool. Okay, let's name my device. Let's see. Live VM. What's going on, Evan? How you doing, sir? Thanks for always being there. Evan, my friends, he's my #1 fan. So if I ever need a good lawyer, I'll know who to call when I'm in New York City. Okay, so we're coming along here. Windows, we're gonna set you up for personal use, because why not? I don't want to sign in. And see, this is why I like the bypassing the NRO, because I don't have to sign in with my Microsoft account. Maybe sign in options gives us something where we can sign in with a basic account. No. Okay, well. My Microsoft account is mikeroysoft.com. Cool. And away we go. No, I don't want to. I think I don't want to do that. What? Let's try that again. Got it right that time. Cool, and that's still moving along. Just checking our resources here. Not a lot of disk stuff, so this is just sort of doing its thing. That's cool, that's cool. All right, and you know, I'm gonna turn all this stuff off. As much as I like being advertised to. Yeah. All right, whatever. All this stuff's fine and dandy. Okay, not really worried about hooking up my Android device. Well, I guess you could, if that's something you want to do. No, we don't want EA Play, although I did install the EA app in my other VM so that I could test out Dragon Age Inquisition. And one of these days when we get DirectX 12 working, I can't wait to play Star Wars Jedi. There's the Jedi Survivor's new one, but the other one that was also fantastic. Cool. So Windows here, getting things ready for me. This is doing its bootloader stuff. Actually, just try and make that a little smaller for now. And I've already shown that. So let's see. While that's going, what else do we have? I'm just going to bring out the tech preview guide here for a quick second. So we've got installing from an ISO file. You can also convert the VHDX, which is cool, but like don't forget that if you're going to convert the VHDX, then those are dev builds and they're going to expire and things like that. So do be careful. You know, so we go through the install, yada yada yada. What else do we have here? And then at the end of it, you get a nice fancy 3D accelerated desktop. Yeah, so this is the other cool thing, being able to import and export VTPM equipped VMs. So this is an Intel thing, but this was something that was highly requested by some of our customers, particularly in the enterprise space, who use OVF tool and export and import things quite a bit, where basically the OVF tool now supports VMs with a TPM. So it actually does this thing called a VTPM placeholder. It sort of injects that so that the OS like has that sort of device, but isn't necessarily using it. And so the process is like you sort of turn off the TPM device, disable encryption, export to OVF, and that export process will make it so that the TPM will be reinserted and the VM will be re-encrypted upon import. That way you're not exporting any of your secrets or anything that needs to be stored in the VTPM itself, while still giving you the ability to have a template, which is pretty cool. That's not quite there. We don't have OVF tool on Apple Silicon finished just yet, but that's absolutely something we're working on. The new XDS encryption screen. Folks are going to notice this when you install the tech preview and you bring up any of the other VMs that have encryption or the TPM, where we had this existing, it's called an encryption scheme called CBC, cipher block checking, I think. And in any case, it's an older way of doing things, but it's worked for us for quite some time. In an abundance of precaution, we've upgraded that to a different encryption scheme called XTS. And that basically has some performance improvements as well as just better security. So it can do things like special random writes and random reads that improve the performance in general. So it's not clear. We haven't done any like benchmarking where old versus new as far as like suspend and resume goes, for example. But that's definitely one of the things that is important from a security perspective. All right, so looks like our installs are done here. So I go ahead. This one we're just gonna finish. And I'll just restart the device here. Let's do a power off and power back on. And this one, tools is already installed. And so because of the services, for example, the auto fit guest and drag and drop watchers and things like that, they just need you to log back out and log back in. But once you've done that, we can see that it's got my Microsoft account icon there. And, you know, here we are, back to the desktop. Boop. 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 It all seems to be working just well. If I go full screen, I don't know if OBS is going to pick up the full screen. Oh, look at that. It does. It's cool. Get out of here. There's a couple of bugs, definitely. For example, one that I'll point out right here is if you I'm finding that if you have the guest selected and you try to connect or you access the toolbar menu up here, you'll see that the mouse is sort of being drawn behind. You can kind of just see it there. Clicks still work, right? But it's just that the mouse is grabbing when it's not supposed to instead of rendering it on the host. So we've identified that. We'll fix that. It's just a total cosmetic thing, but in any case. So here we are. We've got a nice, quick, highly responsive Windows 11 updated, or not quite updated, desktop here. Yeah, the ISO is from, I think, March, I want to say. So when it runs the update, it'll get the different search bar and all the other fun stuff down here too. But let's bring up my downloads folder. And you know, I've got activity monitor here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do a file transfer and just check the speed. So I'm going to go to disk. So you can see we have disk here and the throughput down at the bottom. You know, bytes written, bytes read down here. And so we're going to take, I guess this like 21 gig file should be okay. I'm going to drag it. We're going to drop it onto the desktop. And you can see we're hitting 1.15, 1.3 gigabyte a second. Gigabyte a second, not gigabit. You know, 20 gig file, we transfer that, and here comes 10 seconds-ish, give or take. Not too shabby. So even though right now we don't have shared folders, that's not half bad solution, I think. It should get us over the hump for the time being until we can finalize that the shared folders there and get that wrapped in here. So let's see. Let me just go back and double check the chat and see if you have any questions, because I've been yammering for like a half hour. Okay. Cyprian, my man. How you doing, sir? Tried with 2 CD-ROMs to get both the Tools ISO and the Windows ISO, and I was able to install the drivers before the first reboot. There you go. Bam. And for Fusion and Donglu, for Fusion on Intel CPUs, the window guest refresh rate seems limited to 60 hertz max. Will tech preview telling us 3 increase it? Negative. We're stuck at 60. I'm not sure if that's a thing we can control. I don't think we've looked at it. I for one would be really happy with 120, hertz refresh rate. Your whole ProMotion story there. So definitely not right now, but certainly an improvement over not having the graphics drivers installed in Windows. So I'm actually going to shut this guy down. And personally, I tend to, in ARM, or let me rephrase that, with Windows 11 specifically, I tend to power off and power on VMs instead of suspending and resuming them, particularly because the encryption. It takes an extra amount of overhead to do it. And so instead of we're like a Linux VM, you click the button, it's like whoosh, encrypted, or I should say suspended. With an encrypted VM, it's a lot slower because we have to do some decryption on the fly. I'm hoping that we can get a solution there to improve our quality of life on that side of the house, but It's not quite there yet. Unless I can actually just disconnect. Yeah, fine. We're booting off the hard drive anyway. And so Fedora here, you know, I've usually been an Ubuntu person for like the longest time, but the new versions of Ubuntu just like don't boot. Like if you have an older one, you can upgrade it and you can tag it along and upgrade the kernel and everything else to the latest versions. Likewise, you can take like the server install of Mantic, like the newest one, and then convert it to a desktop. It's a total long arm of work to do that, but it works and it's there. But I've just been so frustrated with the out of box, like it just, like even right now, like I was trying to get Ubuntu Mantic going yesterday and there's a password on the live CD and it's not documented what it is. And it used to be blank and Ubuntu and none of those work. And there's people who've filed issues that say, hey, I'm trying to do this thing on Fusion and it's not working. And the Ubuntu people are like, this isn't a support help forum, go away. And you're like, nice, thanks guys, appreciate this partnership. But hope they figure out that, you know, people want to run Ubuntu on Fusion on Apple Silicon and, you know, they make it a priority to go ahead and do that. Make it supported, or at least just work. You don't have to stand behind it completely, right? All right, cool. What I really wanted to show you here was the shared folders performance. So no, I'm good, thanks. And so we're gonna go up, where's our shared folders? Over here. And I'll add, I'm just gonna add my downloads folder. You know, maybe the ISOs folder is good enough. Fair enough, okay. So we're gonna go inside the VM and where's my button? There you go. And terminal. Does this work? Yeah, oh, that'd be cool. On Mac it works. It'll just open Finder in that folder, so that's cool. So, you know, we've got our ISOs there. Everything shows up. Let's go ahead and just drag one over to the desktop. I keep wanting to invoke a dock down there. Okay, so other locations. Fedora, mount, HDFS, ISOs. And let's list. And we'll just take the biggest one. The biggest one. Monterey. Maybe we'll just do CentOS. We're just going to drag that to the desktop. Actually, let's put it into downloads. And so away it's going. And you can see again down here, our data speed is 500-ish megs a second, 600 megs a second, give or take. And I didn't really, you know, we didn't do anything into the VM. Like VMs already has tools. You know, it's version 2.15. We're about to ship 2.3, I think. So that should, you know, be easily upgradable from within the guest OS's tools themselves, so like apt and DNF and everything else. So this is a pretty welcome improvement, personally, I think. And likewise, you know, the whole super fast resolution changing is there. And I'm also looking at this in like a low resolution. There's a bit of a grievance that I have where, okay, so like I've transferred it or I've switched it to high resolution and that's cool, high DPI, but you can see everything's really tiny and it doesn't really maintain the scale appropriately. So that would be a welcome change for if anybody's on our VMware Tools team watching. We would love it if it would just maintain the correct scale that we want to have there. And just for kicks, 4K, there we go. So, and I mentioned before, like suspending and resuming is pretty quick, right? Like, done, right? And so that's to me is crazy fast. And I do hope that we get to the point where our, the experience that we have with Windows 11 and encrypted VMs is about the same. So lastly, what I wanted to do is let's take some of the VMs that I've already got going here. Yes, this has got stuff. so I've got some games actually in here. If there's any particular games or apps that anybody wants me to test, I'm all for it. You know, I've been doing fun stuff, you know, but I haven't been playing games in a lot of years, right? So the games that I play are kind of older. Look at my pretty face. So much less beard back then. So yeah, back at the desktop. There we go. Don't look at any of my confidential documents. Oh, just hurt my foot. So Steam's coming up here. You know, I'm actually going to try Portal. So I think Steam's going to launch, and then the EA Origins one is going to want to launch too. In any case, we'll bring up Portal. So Portal 2, I love this game. It's just a puzzle game, right? But one of the challenges is that we're currently fighting this bug, and I'm hoping that we'll have it resolved before we GA. But basically, this game doesn't like to handle anti-aliasing. And so this is a 32-bit emulated Intel game that's running on Windows 11 ARM being emulated through the Windows 11 emulation engine, I suppose you could say. So you can see our resolution it's crazy high. Mac OS has funny resolutions. But you can see we've got 4x multi-sample anti-aliasing, so let's turn that off so that we can actually play the game. Because if you have that turned on, it will blue screen the guest, which is not fun, right? But it's something that we're aware of and we're working on it. So, but again, you can see this just, you know, everything's just sort of clicking through here. To me, I'm just impressed that this is an emulated workload. I can't believe that these things run as well as they do. As a, you know, historically using emulation is just a pain and not really optimized. It's just like good enough to sort of just make it work.
Good morning. You have been in suspension for 50 days. In compliance with state and federal regulations, all testing candidates in the Aperture Science Extended Relaxation Center must be revived periodically for a mandatory physical and mental wellness exercise.
Frames per second.
You will hear a buzzer. When you hear the buzzer, look up at the ceiling. Good. You will hear a buzzer. When you hear the buzzer, look down at the floor. Good. This completes the gymnastic portion of your mandatory physical and mental wellness exercise. There is a framed painting on the wall. Please go stand in front of it.
This isn't Twitch, so we're not gonna go ahead and play the entire game here.
There is a framed painting on the wall. Please go stand in front of it. This is art.
But alas. So, again, that's just one example. We've been testing, I've been doing a lot of 3D marks, so the 3D mark benchmarking, just to see how we compare pound for pound, both against ourselves and against our Intel versions, and as well as against the competition. And, you know, we got some work to do, but I am so absolutely happy with what the tools team was able to put together. And what the UI team was able to wire in, right? Like having that drag drop, having the auto fit, to me are just like super nice quality of life things, right? Like just being able to go like that and then like, okay, like this thing's in my way. I'm just gonna get this out of my way for now. Oops. If I actually could, right? And just being able to casually resize it and move it and, you know, deal with it is just such a blessing. So yeah, that's pretty much what I had for folks today. I definitely want to hear from you on what games are you trying? Like, how's that working out? Personally, I'm a big fan of Age of Empires. You know, this game to me was so close to my heart way back in the day. I had so much fun playing it, even in early 2000s, late 90s. I might have crashed it because I changed the resolution in the middle of launch. But yeah, so again, let me see if there's, oh, I am already running it. That's why. Yeah, we can go. And so there's some weird things like that we're seeing happen where it's like, hey, this DirectX version isn't right, or some users have reported having to reinstall DirectX. I just think there's some weird stuff going on when you're dealing with everything in an emulated context that I don't know if things are in the right place or, you know, know what the sort of story is, but again, like here we are running full screen cinematic. Windows 11. I'm running this at like obscene 4,000 plus 4K, bigger than 4K resolution. It's just and even just getting into just do a quick skirmish. I'm the Bulgarian. That's exciting. Computer sounds too loud. I can turn that down. Thanks, Cyprian. I presume that you meant the computer video, not me. But in any case, you know, this is at pretty high. I think I maxed out the settings on this one too. I recall. Where's the options? 10? Yeah. Graphics. Full screen, ultra, yeah, 4096, 2304. That's higher than 4K. And, just fantastically. It's funny, I was like, oh, I need to see if Age of Empires 3 works, and I spent like most of a day just verifying that Age of Empires 2 worked. So, but in any case, let's get out of here. I'm going to end on a high note. Cool. So yeah, here we go. Let me just bring up the chat, see if there's anything anybody wanted to ask. I wasn't sure how long we were going to be. I figured it wouldn't be any longer than an hour, but I hope that that was enough to give folks a good idea on, you know, what we've been able to ship with Tech Preview 23. And so again, you can see like the throughput of the suspend and resume operation for Windows or for encrypted workloads, even with the TPM using our quote fast encryption, it leaves a little to be desired. So that's why I tend to personally shut my VMs down. But in any case, what do we got folks saying in the chat? GTA 4. I have heard GTA 4 works. Does anyone know this ISO create utility we've been seeing? Yeah, you can't find it on Google because I've written it. I wrote it and I haven't shipped it yet. It's mine. It's probably not going to be called ISO create when I'm finished with it, but it was to solve a problem that I had, which is getting ISOs is hard. And then when you have ISOs, managing them is kind of a pain. I have like gobs and gobs and gobs of ISOs. And so what I wanted was an app that basically just handled that for me, and where I could go to it and say, hey, what are my ISOs? Click a button and then you get a new one, or click a button and install it with Fusion. So I really just wanted to give folks a little bit of a sneak on into that, and I hope to have it in everyone's hands later this year. But, you know, I've been busy with Fusion and, you know, getting this thing done, but it uses the a whole bunch of the new stuff that Apple released at WWDC. So it was my way of sort of testing all the new things that Apple has been putting out with Swift. So like it even requires like Mac OS 14 as the base target. So we'll see what happens with that. But anyway, I think that about covers it for my time. I'm going to go ahead and close the stream if I don't see any other questions coming up here. But I just want to thank everybody for joining me. And again, I just want to, you know, huge praise to both the ARM team at VMware, the ESXi ARM folks who made the port of the monitor happen, and the monitor being our hypervisor itself. Just such an important part of getting this to where we are today. And it was a lot of work. And, you know, extra shout out to my man Regis, the original creator of this little thing we call Fusion. You know, he's a good friend, and I'm grateful that now he's, you know, one of the lead architects on the ARM team. So having his expertise coming forward is fantastic. And we were able to catch up at radio this year, where I was able to present. So that was really fun. And super shout out to the tools team. You know, we don't have a product on ARM besides Fusion. And our tools is something that's shared across all platforms. And so the work that we've had to do to get it ready for Fusion and ARM has not been trivial. And I recognize the amount of extra hours and work that team has put together. And I'm so grateful, because Now we have this really awesome story. Windows works great. And even for us internally now, we can really use this thing for our own purposes internally. And you know, that being good enough for us to use as something to get our day-to-day work done, you know, is something that we think is good enough for our customers to use too. So that being said, I'll just leave you with one last thing. Way back in the day, we had, you know, Fusion before it even was commercialized. We were able to finally get, let me see here. We had, you know, we got some beta versions of it. So let me just very quickly. It's funny, the sticker on this thing is like Microsoft Windows beta. Do not share. But we had Fusion beta way back in the day, 2007, I want to say, 2006 maybe, give or take. But it's come a long way. And lastly was just this guy right here. 3D graphics in Fusion, Tony Hawk Pro Skater. Let's see if we can't get that working again. But it was made with a, you know, we made this in the office just ourselves, and my, how we've come a long way since then. So anyway, thanks again everyone for joining. Thanks again to all the teams who helped bring this to life, put it together. Go to blogs.vmware.com, find the Fusion blog. All the links are in there. If you're watching this video, you've already seen it, and hopefully you've already got this installed and running. I will put links into the chat after this is all said and done when the video gets posted, so that way it's easy for folks to click a link and go ahead and get the tech preview. And I will say too, the final icing on the cake here. Normally when we do a tech preview, it's because we're going to have some big major version in the fall, and it's going to have, you know, a new price tag and everything else. We're going to update Fusion 13 with all of this technology. Fusion 13, the next version of it that we ship, is going to have all of this in it. Everybody who's got a copy of it right now, your licenses are going to keep working. You're just going to get all these new features, and everyone's going to be happy, hopefully. So, you know, giving away the goat a little bit there, but I'm just thrilled that we were able to get agreement to make this as a, you know, basically a free update this year. So that being said, thanks everyone for joining. See you guys next time.